Were you to visit the village of Ein Mallaha in the year 12,000 BCE, you would have found a small but thriving settlement, home to perhaps 100 individuals. Its one-room dwellings were semi-subterranean, cut into the earth with foundations of stone and an upper structure likely built of brush and wood. Well ordered and built to last, this clearly is no transient camping site, but a settled, sedentary community. Yet you might be surprised to learn that the inhabitants of Ein Mallaha were not farmers at all, but rather they were hunter-gatherers. Around 13,000 BCE, the formerly dry, cold Levant began to undergo a climactic shift. Precipitation rose, woodland and grassland alike expanded, and conditions throughout the Near East began to grow more amenable to human settlement. It was in the midst of this that the Natufians first arose, establishing Ein Mallaha alongside several other such villages by 12,500 BCE. Located around the border between woodland and forest steppe, these villages would have had access to permanent water supplies, oak and pistachio, gazelle and small game, wild cereals, which they harvested with some of the world's first sickles, along with an array of other such edible plants and animals. It was a veritable cornucopia of food, enough so that even as hunter-gatherers, they appear to have been able to live and hunt in their settlements year-round as a sedentary society. This may not have been the case for all of the Natufians. Certain settlements like Tabqa and Paida truly do appear to have been only temporary, but sedentism otherwise does appear to have been the Natufian way of life. The villages of the Natufians were not uniform by any means, but rather they could be grouped into three categories by size: small, which only covered 15 to 100 square meters, medium, which covered 400 to 500, and large, whose sizes could reach in excess of 1,000 square meters. Their dwellings tended to be between 3 and 6 meters in diameter, half dug into the earth and built of stone, wood, and brush. Actual facilities for storage were surprisingly rare, and though examples like certain plastered pits in Ein Mallaha do exist, they remain in the minority. Perhaps the majority of their storage was in the form of woven baskets kept above ground, as posited by Bar-Yosef. For the time being, we simply don't know. Natufian burials generally took place beneath or beside abandoned dwellings. Alongside these burials were grave goods, necklaces, bracelets, belts, and beads, amongst other such examples of jewellery, though the nature of their materials would vary from village to village. Where fox teeth and partridge bones were used in Hyanim, in Ein Mallaha it was the toe bones of the gazelle that were particularly favoured. Some burials are noticeably elaborate, such as that of a man in El Wad, whose dress includes an elaborate headdress, a necklace, and a band around one leg, all made out of dentalium shells likely acquired via trade. But there is something else in some of these burials that shows a way in which the Natufians were innovators. In Ein Mallaha, a buried woman was found, elderly, and with her arms around a puppy, 6 to 8 months of age. In Hyanim, 2 men were uncovered, and with them 2 dogs, all carefully arranged and buried with each other. Not tame wolves, but true domesticated dogs, some of the first known in the world. For almost 2 millennia the Natufians persisted in their way of life, but it wouldn't last forever. As populations continued to expand, the limits of their hunter-gatherer lifestyle began to catch up with them. Strains posed by population growth led to the overexploitation of the resources around them, in doing so only further depleting the amount of food there was to go around. A habit of killing off the largest males led the overall size of the gazelle population to steadily diminish, and such was their exploitation of the wild cereals and nuts around them that what natural replenishment did occur was far diminished from its potential. Their health waned, and many later Natufian remains show the characteristic signs of childhood malnutrition and famine. All this might have been enough to lead to the collapse of the Natufian culture in any scenario, but we will never know for sure, for another crisis was about to hit the Natufians, one that was completely out of their control and wholly more catastrophic. Around 11,000 BCE, another climactic shift came to strike the landscape of the Northern Hemisphere. Over the course of mere decades, temperatures rapidly dropped, and rainfall receded, leaving behind a cold, drought-ridden environment. This was the Young Dryas, and for the Natufians it was devastating. Already depleted, the oak woodlands wherein they procured so much of their food now died off, whilst the range of the wild cereals they harvested was greatly reduced. Right as population pressures were at their height, the Natufians lost their food supply. There could only be one possible outcome: collapse. By 10,800 BCE, Ein Mallaha, Hyanim, Abu Huraira, and any number of other Natufian villages had been abandoned. Their settled life no longer sustainable, the Natufians had returned to a transient, mobile lifestyle, their former villages now nothing more than burial grounds and occasional gathering places. The reef experiment of permanent living, it seemed, was over. Its legacy, though, still remained. The younger Dryas would continue for another 1,000 years, and as it came to a close, as the peoples of the Levant began to live in permanent settlements once again, they would not do so as hunter-gatherers, but as farmers.